Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the news that the Australian Trade Minister has decided to call time on the negotiations for a post-Brexit trade deal with the UK. A trade deal that our government have already said twice that has been agreed. Anyone would think Boris Johnson was a bit of a liar. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So yeah, this one came as a genuine surprise to me. Of course, anyone paying attention knows you can't just get trade deals as quickly as Boris Johnson and his Brexit cronies claimed. They take years of painstaking diplomacy to come to terms, and then usually a few years more to implement, often with a bit of argy-bargy going on then as well. But Boris Johnson came up with a genuinely new idea for massively reducing the amount of time it takes to get a trade deal. Oh, it's revolutionary. He just agreed to everything the other side said they wanted in return for the hallowed piece of paper that he knew the media would hail as a triumph of his can-do attitude. See, that it becomes so much simpler when you don't have a government looking out for the national interest, because that's what normally takes the time, you see. You've got one party whose negotiators are acting in their national interest, and you've got the other party where their negotiators are acting in their national interest, and there's the argument. When you've got a British negotiating team that's there to do whatever the Australian negotiating team want, it's so much easier. Absolutely revolutionary, this idea. You know, the general population are never going to read the trade deals, even if they weren't being kept under wraps, and the relative distribution of the sections of the media that will call out the capitulation is negligible. So after Johnson set the pattern for just giving in to whatever the other side demanded, I really didn't question the news earlier this year that we had agreed terms with Australia for a trade deal. I didn't bother looking up to see if Australia agreed with this assessment. I just thought, yeah, he's announced another one. You know, we knew from leaks that it had involved giving them easy access to our market, especially for their agri-food products, in return for nothing tangible on our part. Apparently we were going to sell them Marmite or something. Yeah, could easily see that Australia would have been delighted with the easiest trade deal in their history. I said at the time that it would need to be ratified, sure, by their parliament at least. We seem to have circumvented our own. You know, our parliament no longer have a role in scrutinising trade negotiations. Boris Johnson told them to vote him the power to take care of it all. Don't you worry your pretty little heads. And they duly obliged. And the media said nothing. You actually wonder what the media's reaction would be. Let's say if Keir Starmer were able to form a government and started negotiating a proper trading arrangement with the EU behind closed doors, like Boris Johnson does. Would the media be similarly compliant if he agreed terms, if he announced he's agreed these wonderful terms with the EU and didn't publish the details? I suspect not. In fact, I rather suspect that they would flip their collective lids. But anyway, never mind that. We thought that we were getting this Australian trade deal. That would mean cheap, high-intensively farmed products soon be flooding our market, undercutting our own British farmers in their own country. Possibly Johnson believed it would save him from the food shortages that he must have known were on their way. But then a little hiccup. See, it was then reported that the deal hadn't been agreed after all. Australia wanted us to drop our Paris Climate Agreement obligations from the deal. Oh, so we haven't agreed the deal after all. Not that it seemed to hold things up. Our government readily agreed to drop environmental standards in line with Australia's wishes, which tells you all you need to know about Johnson's environmental credentials. He wasn't dropping these standards for a deal with a huge market with the potential for massive growth. He was not prioritising the economy over the environment. He was dropping these standards for the sake of a deal that doesn't boost our exports at all if rounded off to the nearest percent. And what barely above 0% boost the government were claiming for this deal doesn't come into effect for years anyway. This deal is expected to come into effect next year, but we don't get the boost for like a decade or more. Frankly, by the time this deal was supposed to start paying us anything at all, I'd have hoped we'd be back in the single market at least, if not the EU proper, but that looks less likely now. So yes, Johnson cares so little for environmental policies that he will drop them for no gain at all. Just a day of good headlines. That's his price. But again, we then thought the deal was still coming. Oh, you've dropped this latest thing. Yeah, okay. After all, we were just agreeing to everything Australia wanted. But now we hear the news that the Australian Trade Minister has gone back home without agreement still. I thought we had agreement. Twice. So despite the government twice saying that the agreement was done, it still hasn't been months later. Maybe Johnson has hit upon another cracking wheeze. Giving in to the other side gives you a worthless trade deal that results in a day's worth of positive headlines. But if you keep telling people that you've agreed when you haven't, you can get loads of positive headlines. Every time you claim that this time you really, with the cherry on top of agreed, you get your headlines again. Every time it turns out you haven't at all, well, nothing gets said in the press anyway. No headlines about looks like Bojo was lying again, ladies and gentlemen. Quite a cunning trick, that. Maybe you could do it multiple times. Maybe you could do it on a weekly basis with a pool of countries. On Monday, he announces a trade deal with Australia. On Tuesday, it's New Zealand. On Wednesday, it's India. On Thursday, he picks some random island in the Pacific we've never heard of, so we all have to rush to our globes. Then he can talk on Friday, and encouraging talks about the US, and then bash on Saturday the EU, something like that. A full week worth of positive headlines, then just start again the next week with the same stuff. The sheeple will lap it up. Not that I think the end result will be much different. I've no doubt the delays are caused by Australia knowing that they can get even more out of us as they go through the fine details of the full legal text. That's what's happening here. Unlike the British government, the Australian government have been conducting tough trade negotiations for decades. They are well practiced, know what they're doing, and have been presented with a massive market, one of the largest economies in the world, who is desperate to agree anything just to get a good headline in the national press. It's like Christmas. Australia have tried to put extra pressure on Johnson by dangling the carrot of being able to announce the final agreement at his party conference. That's what they said apparently a couple of weeks ago. Boris, would you like to be able to announce this agreement at your party conference? All you have to do is agree to all these things. But obviously we must still be holding out on a couple of things, which is another surprise for me. So we're actually resisting something in this negotiation. Wow, I didn't expect that. No doubt Liz Truss will be loving this, because she used to handle these negotiations but was recently promoted to Foreign Secretary after polling incredibly highly amongst Conservative Party members. And you would imagine those same members probably now think that the only reason it's been delayed is because, oh, Liz got moved up. Their little darling's no longer in charge of it. Or had she still been handling it, it'd all be done now. She's probably loving the false credit. But a report in Politico also said that the deal was still expected to come into force next summer. So the plan to avoid some of the food shortages that we've got right now for 2022 may well be, the intention may well be to solve them by lower quality imports that would not have been lawful as members of the EU, whether for reasons of animal welfare or standards of safety, or both in some cases. Then you further consider that this stuff will be cheaper than the meat we're producing ourselves. Just to highlight the drop in quality we're talking about, it will be produced at literally the other side of the globe and transported all the way here with all of the monetary and environmental costs that comes with that, and still be cheaper in our market than British produce. So not only is British farming being blighted by a critical shortage of workers, but is less than a year away from being undercut by intensive farming methods of the like not possible here. And that's before we even look ahead at what might happen if Trump takes over again and we end up with a US trade deal at some point for their hungry agricultural sector. And I think this will happen. Like I say, what's going on now is Australia's more experienced trade negotiators are going, yeah, we've got all this agreement, but there's this little word here, maybe we could change it to, you give us more stuff. They're squeezing us for everything we have. Happy to run down the clock, put the feet up. They're under no time pressure. The time pressure's on us. If Johnson does see this deal as more than just happy headlines, if he sees it in terms of solving the food supply crisis, I'm sure he'll order his officials to back down on absolutely everything necessary to get the deal in force come next summer. And I'm quite sure the Australian negotiators are working on that assumption as well. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.